The Galactic Council had not convened with such urgency since the Creel annihilation, a war that had razed 5-star systems and left the void teeming with drifting bone ships. But even the horror of the Creel was a ghost beside what now filled the chamber. Dread born not of numbers or firepower, but of biology. Holograms flickered above the crystalline dais, replaying the footage yet again. The creature was human, small by galactic standards, bipedal, its expression contorted with pain and rage. Shackled to a surgical table aboard the Vetari Prime research vessel, the being writhed under the scanning lasers. A glint of metal caught the light, then a scream as an assistant nicked the flesh with a sterilized scalpel. It should have been routine. Then the blood came. A single arterial spurt, incandescent red against sterile white, splashed onto the assistant's gloved arm. The material melted instantly. The assistant followed, flesh hissing and sloughing from bone as she collapsed into a steaming heap. The others didn't have time to react before another arc of blood sprayed across the room, burning through alloy, armor, and air alike. One researcher fled through a sealed door. His last transmission was a scream. His visor had fogged before melting into his skull. Counselor Juvun paused the hologram. Silence blanketed the chamber. This chemical anomaly. It must be synthetic. No, hissed the Xandari bioanalyst. It is innate. Human blood carries a compound, unknown in our databanks, that reacts violently with all known carbon silicate cellular matrices. It's not acid. It's worse. It's selective. It's intelligent in how it decays. A low murmur rippled through the chamber. Even the Stole, a species bred without fear, clenched their thoracic plates. They bleed, said Counselor Vural softly, and we die. In the corner of the chamber, unseen by most, Captain Ian Rourke watched through a hollow feed. Still in his tattered exosuit, blood-streaked and silent, he bore the weight of knowing. He was the human in the footage. He hadn't meant to kill them. When they had taken his squad from the outpost on Series 6, he had expected torture, maybe dissection. He hadn't expected to become a weapon. And now, across half the galaxy, his blood was the signal of extinction. Elsewhere, panic took root like wildfire. Entire systems closed their gates to Earth. Medical bots overloaded with requests for counteragents. Pirate syndicates offered million cred bounties for live human specimens. Some factions saw opportunity. Others saw the end of all things. The Graal Collective declared martial law. The Heliox Dunes, known for their neutrality, erected xenoshields. And on Vaxar Prime, warlords began breeding animals in human blood environments, searching desperately for something that could survive. But no experiment bore fruit. Even diluted, even flash-frozen, even synthesized into base molecules, human blood remained untouchable, a death sentence to all who came near it. The few humans still wandering alien systems found themselves hunted. Some were dragged into arenas. A single scratch from a human opponent was enough to make the richest beings in the galaxy cheer from behind triple Air Force fields. Others were used as weapons. One rebel cell smuggled a human into a planetary prison. Within hours, the prison was a crater. Back on Earth, the governments were torn. The United Front, a temporary alliance formed after first contact, was fractured between two schools of thought. Peace through isolation, argued Dr. Lynn Harrow, head of the Earth Ambassadorial Corps. We go dark. No transmissions. No contact. We remain unknown. Dominance through deterrence, countered General Rourke, recently returned from captivity. We show them what happens when you spill human blood. President A.O. Bolarin was said nothing. Her eyes lingered on the screen, showing a list of vanished colonies. 13 human settlements had disappeared in the past 2 weeks. No wreckage, no survivors, just silence. They're afraid, she finally said, and fear makes monsters out of even the noble. Among the stars, one species stood unshaken. The Zullan AK had never feared death. Born in void, hardened in suns, they valued only the kill. And now, they saw humanity as the ultimate game. Admiral Cortan issued the order, a hunt. Not for extermination. For sport. Capture a human alive, bleed it slowly, unleash its blood in controlled zones. Watch civilizations fall. But it was not a Zolan AK fleet that found humanity next. It was a vessel of the Serity Concord, a race of archivists, collectors of extinct languages who had never lifted a weapon. When their science crew approached a derelict Earth freighter in deep orbit around a black dwarf, they found it empty. No life signs, no damage. Curious, they boarded. The last log recorded a distress call, then silence. An ensign, young and careless, brushed against a dried smear on the hull. He screamed. Flesh bubbled and hissed. His screams turned into gargled cries as the deck beneath him melted. The Serity fled, but it was too late. The smear had rehydrated. Airborne. Invisible. It clung to their suits. It seeped into vents. The Serity were gone within an hour. Their ship drifted, still transmitting a single phrase in looping binary. Blood is the blade. Bleed and be broken. Back on Earth, Rourke stood in a hidden chamber beneath the Arctic expanse. Around him stood men and women dressed not in suits of war, but in robes. Scientists, biochemists, weapon engineers. You realize what they'll do if we keep pushing this, Harrow said from across the table. I do, Rourke replied. But they've already started. Colonies don't vanish on accident. They're trying to wipe us out before we understand our advantage. She frowned. We're not gods. We're scared animals with poison in our veins. He nodded, which makes us perfect. We don't have to be gods, just monsters. They were developing the compound now, not just harvesting blood, but altering it, crystallizing the active agent, synthesizing delivery systems. There were whispers of suits that could bleed on command, of bombs laced with the compound. Some among them spoke of guilt, others of vengeance. But Rourke spoke only of survival. And in the shadows of orbit, above the cradle of humanity, 1,000 alien eyes watched Earth with growing dread. They had discovered the truth too late. The galaxy was not the hunter anymore. It was the prey, and the blood had only just begun to flow. The wind on Mars base Theta was thin and dry, filtered through atmosphere generators that hummed like sleeping beasts beneath the colony. Captain Ian Rourke stepped into the command chamber, the red dust still clinging to his boots. He scanned the room, noting the faces, tired, resolute, and all far too young for the things they'd seen. General Usha Danvers stood at the central table, arms crossed, her uniform sleeves rolled high to reveal old burn scars. She'd once led the lunar repulsion campaign when Earth had barely mastered space combat. Now, she commanded the front lines of a very different war. They've started deploying hybrid tech, she said without turning. Her voice was low, clipped. 2 of our scouts went dark near Altair 6. Wreckage showed signs of biometal interface. Inorganic armor, grafted with something that reacts to hemotoxins. Rourke leaned forward. You think they've started adapting? Danvers gave him a look that said, don't be naive. They're experimenting. We're running out of time to stay ahead. A faint beep sounded from the holomap. Dr. Maya Eleanor, the base's lead biochemist, activated the display. A wireframe of a human circulatory system unfolded, pulsing slowly. Red lines twisted in delicate patterns through the model's limbs. We've been working on a delivery system, she began. Not just react to blood. Directed excretion through microducts under the skin. It allows soldiers to weaponize injuries, bleed at will precisely. No open wounds needed. Rourke raised an eyebrow. Controlled bleeding. Precisely controlled, she said. The microtubules are lined with self-sealing nanofibers. Soldiers can spray, spatter, or mist their blood. It vaporizes on contact with oxygen and becomes a field weapon. He turned to Danvers. You tested this? She nodded. 2 platoons deployed to the Saren Cloud outpost last week. They neutralized 3 battalions of Zolan AK in under 12 minutes. No human casualties. Silence settled over the chamber. It's working, she added, almost reluctantly. We're turning biology into strategy. And with that, humanity crossed a threshold it could never uncross. The soldiers of Theta Base weren't just infantry anymore. They were biochemical juggernauts. Among them was Sergeant Talia Voss, once a schoolteacher from Cape Town, now the leader of Fire Team Echo. She stood in the armory, holding her new suit with reverent detachment. Matte black, laced with blood channel filaments and internal pierce nodes, it shimmered with dormant lethality. "Looks like a coffin," muttered Private Kennel beside her. "No," Voss said quietly. "It's a message." Their mission came quickly. A transmission from a human freighter fleeing the Kepler belt had gone silent mid-broadcast. The last words: biological breach, unknown entity, request immediate evac. Fire Team Echo dropped within the hour. The derelict freighter floated in a lazy tumble. Lights flickered inside its hull like dying fireflies. As Voss and her team approached the airlock, Rourke's voice came through comms. "You're authorized to use full emission protocol. No survivors. If they've turned, we can't take risks." They breached the lock. Silent corridors welcomed them. Blood and bile smeared across bulkheads. But it wasn't human blood. Voss recognized the greasy, iridescent sheen of alien plasma, vaporized and burned into the walls. Motion sensors pinged faint readings, then silence. Kennel edged forward, rifle raised. No bodies, but something's still here. Voss activated her suit's prime node. The channels beneath her skin shivered, and warm pressure pulsed through her arms. She pressed her hand to the wall. A faint hiss followed, and red mist bloomed like ink in water. A scream erupted down the hall. A creature burst into view, part Virexian, part mechanical. Its limbs were fused with scorched alloy, and from its chest sprouted tendrils of what looked like bone metal. It leapt, too fast for any warning. Voss didn't flinch. She pivoted and slashed her forearm across the corridor wall. Blood sprayed in a precise arc. The creature hit the cloud and shrieked, its body decomposing mid-motion, limbs dissolving into ash before they struck her. Kennel stared wide-eyed. "That wasn't armor." "No," Voss said. "It was alive. They're fusing the hybrids. Testing for immunity." She knelt and touched the residue. Still sizzling. They weren't just adapting. They were evolving. Rourke reviewed the footage in his quarters, eyes cold. The hybrids weren't accidents. This was strategy, deliberate creation. They found a way to manipulate blood toxicity, Dr. Eleanor said over the secure line. "We intercepted alien transmissions describing something called Project Grievance. They're trying to isolate the acid component in our hemoglobin." He knew what that meant. If the enemy cracked it, if they found a way to neutralize the reactive agent, humanity would lose its edge. Worse, they might find a way to reverse engineer it. Weaponize it. Double research allocation, he ordered. "I want counter-hybrids on the table." Danvers appeared beside him a moment later, arms crossed. "You're becoming the thing they fear most." "I don't care what they fear," Rourke said. "I care what survives." In a distant system, far beyond the veiled nebula, a war council of the Allori matriarchate convened in secret. The Allori were not warriors. They ruled with wisdom, not fire. But even they now considered an unspeakable possibility: containment. Earth must be sealed, the High Matron declared. Not destroyed, just isolated. They cannot be allowed to leave their system. Let them reign in silence. Others disagreed. They will not stay silent forever. No species ever has. Then, the matron whispered, they must fear silence. It wasn't hatred. It was calculus. Because if humanity ever decided to bleed intentionally, if it chose war instead of survival, the galaxy had no answer. Fire Team Echo returned from the freighter with 3 wounded and no deaths. The hybrids had been destroyed, but the message was clear. "They're not afraid of us anymore," Voss said during debrief. "They're learning." Rourke nodded. "So we stopped teaching. What's our next move?" He looked at the flickering star map. Dozens of systems now quarantined. A dozen more at war. Earth was surrounded by a sea of red. "We take the fight to them," he said. "But not with ships. With biology. We show them that the moment they spill human blood, their extinction begins." Danvers stiffened. "That's a doctrine, not a defense." "It's both." The council back on Earth hesitated. Peace had always been the goal, but now peace meant silence. Obedience. Fear of being hunted. and humanity had never been good at bowing. The second phase began quietly. Test subjects, genetic augmentation, soldiers trained not just in tactics, but in hemorrhagic precision. A battlefield soaked in blood was no longer a tragedy, it was a strategy. They would become what the galaxy saw them as. Not people, but warnings. And somewhere in a hidden lab on Titan's shadowed side, an infant hybrid stirred in its incubation pod. Part human, part something else entirely, its blood already hissing against the glass. The storm over Titan had been brewing for weeks. Electromagnetic pulses coiled in the upper stratosphere, flickering like cold fire across the sky. Deep beneath the frozen crust, the vault stirred for the first time since the protocol was enacted. Lights blinked on in sequence, one by one, like ancient runes awakening. In the central chamber, Sergeant Talia Voss stood in silence, her breath visible in the freezing air, her gaze fixed on the hybrid child suspended in the pod. It no longer looked like a child. 6 months had passed since the incident on the freighter. In that time, the frontier had changed. Borders didn't exist anymore. Only battle lines and zones of contagion. Colonies had fallen, some without a fight, others in horrifying silence. But Titan remained, untouched, because it held something no one could afford to lose. Project Grendel, the child, designated A01, was a fusion of human DNA and harvested remnants from the dead hybrids. It had grown rapidly, developing secondary neural clusters and skin reinforced with carbon-threaded protein scales. Its blood was unstable, hyperacidic beyond even the highest military thresholds. It couldn't be deployed, not yet. But it watched them, eyes like molten copper. It learned. "Are you afraid of it?" asked Dr. Eleanor quietly, standing beside Voss. Voss shook her head. "I'm afraid of what happens if it chooses a side." "You think it's capable of that?" "It's half human. It has to be." Across the facility, alarms blared suddenly, cutting through the cold stillness. A tremor passed through the floor, subtle and distant. Voss and Eleanor exchanged a glance. "They found us," Voss said. The command hub was already in chaos when they arrived. General Danvers barked orders at officers while holomaps lit up with red markers. Dozens of incoming signals, converging fast. Unmarked vessels, no response to hails. Silent, coordinated, deliberate. Stealth crafts, Danvers confirmed. Zolinic signature modulation, but tighter, more refined. "They've never breached the belt before," Rourke said, stepping in. He looked more gaunt than the last time Voss saw him, as though the weight of each decision had carved itself into his bones. They must have built a relay system to mask their approach. "Or someone let them in," Danvers added, voice low. The thought hung heavy in the air. Rourke didn't waste time. "Evacuate secondary labs. Prep surface defenses. I want every active field suit online. And get Voss." "I'm here," she said, stepping forward. He nodded grimly. "You're taking Grendel." Eleanor's voice cracked. "It's not ready. It never will be." Rourke interrupted. "This is it. Either we control the battlefield or we die on it." Danvers didn't argue. She just moved. Within the hour, the sky above Titan burned. Enemy ships pierced the atmosphere like flaming daggers, slicing through the static clouds and deploying troops with terrifying speed. But what landed wasn't familiar. These weren't the gangling hybrids of before. They were sleeker, faster. Their bodies absorbed light, and their movements were too precise to be instinctual. "They've started cloning tactics," Voss muttered as her team engaged the first wave. "They've been watching us." The air was chaos. Screams cut short. Gunfire. The distinct hiss of blood vaporizing on contact. Fire Team Echo deployed across the northern quadrant, suits glowing crimson as they bled with surgical intent. It was an orchestra of violence, choreographed and brutal. But it wasn't enough. The enemy kept coming. Inside the vault, Grendel stirred. Alarms wailed louder now. Eleanor stood at the terminal, hands shaking as she keyed in override codes. The child's pod hissed open, steam rising from the seams. The hybrid stepped out, silent, curious. "You're not supposed to be a weapon," she whispered. It looked at her, not through her, into her. Then it turned. When Voss saw the creature walk into the firelight of the battlefield, she didn't recognize it as the child she had watched in stasis. It moved with purpose, not confusion. Its steps were soundless, but the enemy reacted immediately, shrieking and scattering. Whatever command link they shared snapped the moment they saw it. Grendel raised a hand. Nothing visible happened. Then, one by one, the enemy forces collapsed. Some combusted from within, others froze mid-motion. Whatever the hybrid was, it had evolved beyond mere blood. It was emitting something, pulses, vibrations, chemical frequencies. A language of fear. "Dear God," Rourke whispered from the command feed. "It's not just mimicking us. It's rewriting us," Eleanor said. "It's learned that its blood is a tool. But its mind is a weapon." For a moment, the battlefield stilled. Then Grendel turned toward the human lines and paused. A heartbeat of hesitation, the kind of pause that rewrites history. It walked slowly to Voss, eyes unblinking. The soldier didn't raise her weapon, didn't move. She watched as it extended a hand toward her chest. Not to strike, not to harm, to feel her pulse. "You know what we are," she said, voice hoarse. "Do you know what you are?" The hybrid tilted its head, and then it spoke. Only one word. But it was enough to silence the comms across the sector, enough to send a signal to every listening outpost, every alien interceptor, every desperate human command post watching the Titan feed. "Survivor." No one spoke for several seconds. Not even Danvers. Then Rourke gave a single order. "Follow it." Grendel moved forward, no longer a test subject. It tore through the remaining enemies like a force of nature. The human troops fell into formation behind it, not out of command, but instinct. They knew what it was now. It wasn't just a hybrid. It was proof that the war had changed. No longer species against species, but idea against fear. As the last enemy ship fell from the sky in a pillar of smoke, the battlefield quieted. Fires crackled. The dead lay where they fell, both alien and human. Grendel stood at the cliff's edge, watching the stars. Voss joined it, her armor scorched. Blood dried across her suit in arcs of weaponized memory. "What now?" she asked. The hybrid didn't respond immediately. Then it raised its hand toward the heavens, slowly, pointing not in warning, but in promise. And for the first time since the war began, humanity understood. They were no longer fighting to survive. They were evolving to conquer. And the stars, those distant fires that once promised exploration, now whispered something new. "Prepare."